going to now welcome to the stage Paul Nazareth. And I run into Paul, well, virtually, because I took a class that he gave as part of the TAGP program on philanthropy. And all the way through the class, he kept making references to the SSVP. He kept talking about how he sees that society is on the roster, and there were 85 people on, people from hospitals and universities and all sorts of, and there was one little me. And so he kept talking about his example about his own experience with the society as a third generation Vincentian, which led me to then reach out to him and say, hey, we're going to have this little thing called the ANF, and we would really love to have you involved and talk about philanthropy and the value of talking about money and why money is important and how easy it is to actually engage people in that conversation. So I'm going to just go do a quick recap of his experience. He started his fundraising career at Scarborough Missions. He's worked for the Archdiocese of Toronto and has educated diocese financial staff and clergy at all levels. He was also part of the team that created a little thing called Canada Helps. You might have heard about that. And he's on the board of several charities, including the Circle of Indigenous Philanthropy and the editorial committee of the Philanthropist Journal. And he serves as a faculty for the Master of Financial Advisor in Philanthropy. That's a mouthful. And it's a designation in Canada. He's also an instructor on tax and advisor networks with organizations like CPA, Advocis, and estate planning councils. He writes on philanthropy for a variety of publications and regularly appears on national radio and television. He is the foremost expert in this field today, and we're very, very thrilled to have him on board. Thank you for joining us.
So also in the essence of keeping us on time, I'm grateful to Philippe and the team for giving us some space for a workshop this afternoon. So today, my presentation will definitely garner a lot of questions from you on tactics. How do we do this? I'm going to share with you in this presentation today what's possible. We're seeking hope. But when you want to know how do we do this or these platforms, et cetera, you're going to get two things. One, of course, you'll get a copy of this. The team already has it. But at the end of my presentation is 3 pages of web links. Every report, every book, every resource that I mentioned, you're going to get a copy and you'll have the resources. And then if you have other questions on tactics, we have time this afternoon in the workshop. I want to start by introducing you to 2 of the most famous Catholic fundraisers in the history of North America. You know these guys? Yes, indeed. Catholic orphans who were told by a nun the property tax assessment has been reassessed and we need $5,000 in 30 days. So what did they do? Unfortunately, they defaulted to what we do in many of our parishes. They ran a special event. They did run a special event and things went a little wonky. As if you've watched the movie, you know, this is a lot like running in a parish and trying to get the band back together. Again, as Philippe shared with you, and I'm going to share a little bit more with you about my story and history that deals with this Vincentian connection. And indeed, I am a 3rd generation Vincentian. My family ancestrally is from the Quebec of India, Goa, which was converted by the Jesuits around the same time. And actually, economic refugees went to Africa. My parents born and raised in Uganda. Vincentians there and very active. And then in the refugee crisis of the 70s with the dictator Idi Amin, came here to Canada and established, actually born in Toronto and raised in Mississauga. So my family at St. Patrick's Parish for many years. And again, I worked in the Archdiocese of Toronto and started at Scarborough Missions. But over this time, and frankly, a lot of my work in fundraising, I've been in fundraising for 25 years. And I started all of that because of, frankly, Vincentian trauma. Hanging off the back of bundled Sunday trucks, always fundraising in parishes. And even as a kid, I thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. And then as I went to university and I was volunteering there, I got connected into university and hospital fundraising, which we know is well-resourced and highly effective. It was a really interesting thing when I learned a lot more of those resources and then became a specialist in the tax and law of giving in Canada. That's my specialty, and I teach it to both charities and advisors who help their clients give away money. So that's what we're going to talk about today, philanthropy in Canada and how it connects to our Vincentian mission. But in my 25 years, of working for banks and popes and all these large organizations. I was at U of T at the tail end of Canada's first $1 billion fundraising campaign. And most people don't know that Canada Helps was born in a church pew. And I'll be sharing more with you about that. But a lot of what I'll be sharing with you today is data and information on charitable giving in Canada. And the most important thing I hope to leave you with today is the secret that philanthropy, its Latin term, is supposed to mean the love of humanity. With great respect, I don't know how many charities you know really love humanity. It's a big industrial complex, always trying to help, and that's a good thing. But we know too, Vincentian spirit is about meeting the human where they are, not just giving them money, but meeting them where they are. Now, what's interesting is we don't really know. We don't talk a lot about giving in Canada, how it works, the numbers. This was the first infographic ever produced by the Canada Revenue Agency Charities Division. And it shocked a lot of folks in the world of charity because it talked about what were the main ways that charity was connected. This was 2015. And the number one collection method of fundraising in Canada at the time was collection plates. We don't talk a lot about that. At the time, $15 billion donated, all these walks and runs and rides. But that humble plate is the center of giving in this country. Actually, my first job out of university was working for a company called Liturgical Publications. Anybody know these folks? They're the producers of all of the church bulletins in Ontario, a little bit of Quebec, and a little bit of Winnipeg. I was 19. And I was driving to a different parish every week. I would visit about 200 parishes a year and help them with their bulletin. And it was interesting because Liturgical Publications was a terrible business because the people who ran it were Catholics. They weren't trying to make money. They were just trying to provide parishes with bulletins, something that's so needed. My job wasn't just the publication side, but was to sell the ads on the back. And I want to tell you how many times I would go into these communities, even today, and see the business owners that support the parish, that make the bulletin possible. And people want to tell us in a digital world, bulletins aren't important. Try making a spelling mistake in a bulletin. The parish office is going to hear by Monday morning. Right? We like to talk about these things. This is the wonderful part about us being an analog community in a digital world. We are connected. And I want to remind you, outside of the doors of those churches, you will not be able to beat Sick Children's Hospital and all these gigantic institutions. But inside the doors of our churches and our hearts, God is supposed to be number one. And we are allowed to use language like that. But I'll tell you, how many times we're supposed to do fundraising in our community, and everybody goes and asks these people for money, but they're trying to support the community. Again, one of the most challenging things about fundraising, everybody thinks it's about asking. Do you know what the most powerful two words in fundraising are? Thank you. You want to know what the absolute worst practice, not best practice, the worst practice in fundraising, recognition, and gratitude is in the charitable sector? Churches. What I mean by that is, how do we all get our tax receipts at the beginning of the year? In a windowed envelope with nothing, not even a thanks most of the time from the pastor. And in fact, usually the announcement off the pulpit isn't thank you for what you have sacrificially given, is could you people pick up your receipts so that Sheila in the office doesn't have to mail them out? God loves a cheerful giver, but God also loves a grateful receiver. Right? In our parishes, what culture do we have around this? This is a 2019 report done by CBC. It was a very interesting study done by a heritage charity that helped us understand how many faith-based buildings there were in Canada. 28,000 churches, mosques, synagogues. And their prediction was by 2030, 1/3 of them would be bankrupt. That was in 2019. Thanks to our friend the pandemic, we're well ahead of schedule. But I want to share with you that in my work serving the church and charities in the sector, this is not always a faith problem. A lot of this is a fundraising problem, that we don't want to adapt what we do in the community to make sure that we meet people where they are. We've heard several times here this week about helping people give what they have, right? Do people carry cash with them anymore? Some of us do. Many young people don't. Many families don't. Frankly, if you get some chance to talk to me today, take a look at this ridiculous St. Michael's ring that I like to wear just to remind me of the foolishness of parish fundraising. I bought it at a bake sale. There's always a side table at the bake sale of whatever rummage things have there. This was probably someone's family heirloom. And at the time, they were raising money for what? The poor. Who are the poor? Where are the poor? We don't know, but we're raising money for them. And at the times, it was a bake sale. And I said to the person selling it to me, all right, we want to help you to do this. I'll buy this or buy these things. Do you have anything but cash? Do you take tap or do you have point of sale? No. Folks, it is 2024. Drug dealers have tap. And here we are at parishes saying, do you have gold teeth or doubloons? We look like pirates. Again, I said to the head at the time of Vincent de Paul, who was running the bake sale, how much is the ring? It looks lovely. He said $20, but I'll take anything you got on you. Don't the poor deserve better? Right? And again, I told them, all right, kids, we want to buy muffins and all this stuff. Empty out your pockets. And the kids emptied out their pockets. And I told them, what we've got here is $4, a button, and a booger. Don't say yes. And he said, take the ring and go. Remember, the poor deserve better. The people we serve deserve better. And one of those ways in which they deserve better is we need to update on the technology and the ways of fundraising to meet not just other charities, but to make it easy for our parishioners and our supporters to get the money to us. People do not know. Canada Helps is actually now over 20 years old. It has facilitated over $3 billion of donating. It is now up to $500 million cash in Canada a year. That 90% of that is cash, a little under 2-3% is actually in stocks, which I'll talk about in a bit. But how was it formed? It was formed because 3 students who were computer engineers came home for Christmas, and their moms forced them to go to church, as moms are apt to do. And these 3 young people sitting in the pew saw the basket and said to their pastor, we'd like to give. But is this the only way you have? You don't have any other method for us to give you money? And the pastor said 2 things to them. Number one, you're 17 years old, kid. How much money could you have? They were terrifying little young children. They had already businesses, 16, 17. They were geniuses, and they were already in university. Also, the pastor said to them, don't worry, kids. This internet thing is going to blow over. And they did a year's study, and they did get some charitable support. They talked to a couple hundred parishes across the diocese, and of course went to the diocese, and the diocese said, no, we can't help you. And so they went into their basement with some very basic funding and built Canada Helps over a weekend. How do I know this? Because that was my parish. And frankly, I was babysitting one of those kids at the time. His family was in my church group, and I would constantly tell his mother, you need to beat this kid more because he thinks he's a genius. Unfortunately, he was a genius. He was an amazing young man who actually, after founding Canada Helps, a charity, founded it, handed it back to the board, the 3 founders, and they went off to their lives. One of them does social innovation projects all over Asia, actually building smart slum technology for people to be able to access healthcare in these communities. The second one runs foundations across Europe, and the third one is a random plastic surgeon in Hamilton, Ontario. He's the big donor. But it was founded by these Catholic young men trying to help churches. And actually, as the platform grew over those years, they hit 10 million in less than 5 years. When I came on board as the vice president in 2018, we were at about 39 million. And we had brought on a new leader to help us scale past the 100. That was 2018. And again, today, the platform is facilitating $500 million a year cash, mostly to small charities, and half of it almost all faith-based institutions. It was built for us. So, and it is a charity in the space. It's important to know the resources. When I was on the board of the National Catholic Broadcasting Council, frankly, the daily TV mass, because both my mother and my father-in-law love the TV mass, and everybody who's got a broken leg knows it. And I knew that as we would go to a more digital society, we needed the Eucharist to reach people in their homes, wherever they were. We have more people who are homebound than ever before, and that was my passion, making sure we could help people stay connected to the Eucharist and get them back physically to their parish. And then again, the pandemic happened, and the TV Mass became the spare tire for the Eucharist. And it was right before that that we had done a lot of work to digitize their fundraising. Simple stuff at the end of the credits. If you would like to give, here's the website, etc. And we took their donations from $200,000-300,000 to a couple $1 million online. Now it's well over a few million to make sure that the Mass can support what it needs to. A few stories of this structure. When I actually was at Scarborough Missions for a number of years, and I moved from there to my alma mater, U of T. And actually, when I went to U of T, I got in by all of these applications, but I said, do not send me to the Catholic college. I'm not sure if I'm actually Catholic. I think I might be brainwashed after how many years of prayer groups and my mother circulating all these statues and chalices. So they sent me to the most secular college, and then I married the first girl I caught sneaking off to church every week with me. I met my wife the first day of Flash Week. And both of us in the ministry of the church. Again, I'm going, she's Filipino, and between the two of us, we got all the ministries locked up. We've got to remember too, all these generations that used to be thought of as immigrants are now first and second generation in Canada. Their children are doing well. There's a lot of people who are ready and know they need to give back. A few stories for you on that. I love that we have a balcony today. One of the parishes when I started a family that I moved to, again, frankly, because I worked for the Archdiocese and visited all the parishes, I choose my parish very particularly. Two things I look for is straight, hard, good homilies, value that medicine for us, and a financially feasible parish, because I can't be involved in how many campaigns if we're always fundraising. And at the first time I went to a new church with my kids when we were young, it was a church that had a balcony. And when we went in there, we saw all the young families with the kids up in the balcony. Awesome. We went up to the balcony. I was so excited that we had found community. And then it was time for the offertory. And the basket didn't come up. So I took my envelope and I said to everybody around me, anybody want me to take their envelope downstairs? And 2 or 3 other people said to me, hey man, you don't get why we're up here. And when I went to register at the parish, that's what I said to the pastor. I said, Father, here is what I do now as a ministry. This is going to be called the balcony ministry. And I will come to every mass. And I will take that basket up there, because all these young people who tell us they have young people and don't have money are all buying houses. This was before the recession. And they had what they needed to have. And we need to hold people responsible. And so, one of the first gifts that I worked on, I want you to know, is when I was with Share Life in the Archdiocese and things like that, was a donor who had given us the most amount of money and no one had talked to them, $100,000 a year. This is one of the big secrets in fundraising, and I want to teach you. There's a lot of big highfalutin hospital university things that's going to intimidate you. We have the power of Christ. Do not let that power away by trying to do what they do. No one can talk to people's hearts like we can. And so I told them I'm going to use the old trick, which is bring the receipt. So I dropped the receipt to this dude's house, and this person said, oh my gosh, you're here, thank you. And so I gave him the receipt for $100,000. And he said, you know what, kid, you're here. I'm just going to write next year's check. So he starts writing out the check. And while he's writing the check, he's giggling. He's a quite big man. I don't know if you've ever seen a big man giggle. It's not a comfortable sight. If anybody remembers Dukes of Hazzard, think Boss Hall, right? With Roscoe Pico Trainer, the whole thing. Yep, yep, yep. And he's writing the check. And I was 21 and too young and inexperienced and just ran, like my boss said, take the money and run. Don't ask no questions. Don't have any conversations. I came back the next year. And he said, here you are, son, again. I'll write that check. And this time he's jiggling. Everything is giggling. And I finally said, well, sir, what's going on? And he said, as soon as I finish writing this check and you leave, I'm going to buy an Audi. I said, okay. And he goes, last year, I bought a jacuzzi. And next year, I'm going to buy a boat. And I'm buying it all with your money. I said, I'm sorry, what? He goes, let me tell you something, young man. 5 years ago, my spouse and I went to our financial advisor and asked them how much we could afford to give. Told them how many charities we care about, and they told us how much we could afford to give. We can afford to give, in writing, the Archdiocese and the church, the parish, all of that, about $250,000 a year. But you keep sending me a letter that asks for 100. And my wife said I could do whatever I want with the rest. And I said to him, why did you tell me that? You know I'm coming back next year asking for the $250,000. Remember, he was a Catholic and he confessed. And he said, look, son, I know if I don't do the right thing, eventually it's going to get a lot hotter than a jacuzzi. Never forget that our people, through stewardship, know what they have to give. Let me tell you a little Christian fundraising secret. You don't got to ask. And if you do this right, don't ask. Remind them to pray. close the door and talk to their father in secret. Because the worst thing about God is, if you ask a charity how much to give, they will always say, give what you can. But when you ask God, God always says, all of it. And again, my work in this space is actually, again, the tax and law of charitable giving. People don't know that Canada has the single greatest charitable tax credit system in the Western world. That comes from CPA, from the accountants, but nobody knows. Right? So I joined the University of Toronto, tail end of the $1 billion fundraising campaign. I was learning all this highfalutin fundraising, but I'd moved parishes. I found a home, Holy Rosary at Bathurst and St. Clair, a perfect place because I lived on the poor side, and the Out of the Cold was run by the wealthy parishioners. They put in the money, they ran the program, etc. And I came up through the ranks because I left home for 2 reasons: to have my own church and to cook, because I wasn't allowed in the kitchen. My mom wouldn't let me in there. And so I left home and I was cooking in a wonderful program at the parish. It started, in fact, Sister Susan Moran is often credited of starting the Out of the Cold movement in the Greater Toronto area in 1984. And the program had grown to about 300-400 people a weekend. I was helping out there just as a cook, etc. And then the key lead person had to leave very suddenly. And I'd been there for a number of years, so they asked me at 25 to take it over. And I'm fundraising on the weekdays and running this program 40 hours on the weekend, shopping all Friday night, everything. And I took it over, but I was a professional fundraiser. And I made a huge mistake. Canceled the pancake breakfast. 30 years running. And why? Because the pancake breakfast as a fundraiser was losing money. And it actually wasn't even losing a little bit of money. It was losing a lot of money. And it was supposed to be our main fundraiser. And I canceled it. And let me just tell you something. Have you ever got death threats from people over 80? They're so long-winded. Listen, this is what I'm going to do to you. And oh my goodness, that was a terrible mistake. Don't get on the wrong side of the CWL or the Teresans. This is like West Side Story, right? They're going to come out. So we started the pancake breakfast and we changed it to pay what you want to. And I changed our fundraising and I spoke off the pulpit. Remember, we got a lot of homeless programs in all of our major urban centers, but they are run by governments and they do not treat people like human beings. And so I told the parish, remember, this is a private program. There are no hairnets. There aren't gloves. We cook for these folks like family. I had an army of 200 grandmothers. They made the mains. I had 2 shifts of 50 volunteers in the kitchen who would make 1,000 pounds of food every Saturday morning, soup, salads, all the sides, fresh, like family. And I told the parishioners, I got bad news. We're not running this like we used to. And again, wealthy people, you know too. There's a lot of them, and I've spent most of my life in the homes of wealthy people. A lot of them think that just because I'm so rich, I must be smart. Right? And so helping them understand this is what our faith means. And we're going to run this like a family kitchen. I may even buy these folks caviar. If you got a problem with that, I encourage you to stop giving. But if you want to treat these folks like family, help us out. And we lost half of our active donors, and donations went from 75,000 to 150,000. Because when we tell people what we're going to do, you know, the Association of Fundraising Professionals in Canada, massive research on why Canadians give. And they tell us the #1 reason why a person doesn't make a second donation is you didn't thank them and you didn't tell them what you did with the money. That's something we can do so well because we are so close to the ground, right? A young man walked into the Out of the Cold from a very wealthy family, and his mother was giving him and me and all these instructions. And I was like, you need to go home. I'll talk to your son. This young man had a very dangerous peanut allergy. And his mother was like, don't let him near peanuts. He should be on this or whatever. His mom leaves and he goes, I want to make peanut butter sandwiches. This kid got a hazmat suit and he made peanut butter sandwiches for the people he saw on the street. This kid is super wealthy. And he says, I know these people. We drive by them. We step over them to get to the places we want. He knew that wasn't right, and he was dying to do something to give his part. Never doubt the heart of a Catholic giver. They just want to help. All we got to let them know is, you have stuff, here's how you can give it. Right? Again, my biggest problem actually when I took over the program was helping a lot of our older parishioners who grew up in a depression era, in a scarcity era. And so many times when some of the people who we were serving would ask for a couple slices of bread to make a sandwich, they would give them one, and they would go and freeze the rest. I told them, we're going to get rid of these freezers. in God's abundance. And of course, the abundance that I used at the time was moving from the Loblaws they were shopping at to Costco. And then from Costco to wholesale distributors. We have that ability. Right? Again, actually, the biggest weakness of food banks is all they ever ask for is food. When what we really need very often is money. Right? So we've got all these abilities. Again, out of the cold here, they were taking this picture in the space. You know, it was funny. I got pulled into the office at the university and they said, "You're talking to a bank vice president and we don't like it. You're not cleared for that conversation, young man." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they showed me a picture of Doug. Doug is a member of our parish and he chops onions for me at the Out of the Cold. We talk all the time. And they said, "Doug is the vice president of the Royal Bank. Do not talk to him about giving." I said, "Listen, Doug chops the onions. So unless one of y'all is going to come and chop the onions, we got a problem." They said, "It's fine. As long as you're not talking to Doug about giving, that's fine." Frankly, I thought Doug was a crazy old man who had mental health problems. And he was always trying to give me management advice. And I was like, "Doug, chop the onions." Did I listen to Doug a little bit more after that? You bet. Did Doug become a six-figure donor to the parish before we left? You bet. People know what they have and what they owe. Now, when I worked at the Archdiocese, one of my challenges is so many pastors think that their parish is the only one. We know that every parishioner has a circle of churches and Catholic and Christian charities in their kind of giving portfolio. We know that everybody has a main church, absolutely. But a lot of kids have churches they go to for family, vacation, sacramental road trips, meaning when they go to see a baptism or some sort of a sacrament in another parish. Have you ever been at a parish and there's all these families and they're pretty clearly wealthy? And are they using those pink visitor envelopes? No, because who carries cash? And if they don't even understand what the need is here, right? So we need to support them in that. And of course, everybody's got the Hail Mary Pass, late night service. Everybody knows what the latest service is in their diocese for whenever there's football or something on Sunday. But we've got to meet donors where they are. A number of parishes who have started using TAP just for the candles. I've seen a 500-600% increase in donations just on the candles, right? We need to make sure we have this technology for the work that we do. I want to share with you one of the biggest secrets going on right now in the world of charity that the charities cannot keep up with because they cannot connect with it. The old way was just about money, and the new way is about meaning. And the old way, when it was just money, we couldn't beat a hospital or a university or a United Way or a major charity. But when it comes to meaning, before those doors close, you can talk to people of who we are and what we do. That's what's really important in the space. This is currently the way that we fundraise in our Catholic parishes and dioceses across the country. We've got mostly weekly offertory done in envelopes, baskets and envelopes. When we have pre-authorized bank debit, sometimes we do campaigns and then we receive requests and other things. Sometimes parishes have online giving, and actually the biggest thing that's not giving, that parishes are not supporting well, is transactions. Meaning you're selling how many tickets a year for the spaghetti dinner, for the Knights of the Columbus event, etc. Nobody's got point of sale, right? If you want to be able to have a parishioner walk in, you know how many, yesterday, we went to mass yesterday. I don't know if anybody saw me in there taking pictures in the lobby. Count how many times when you go to church, you're asked for money. Again, as a diocesan curia in fundraising, I would beg our pastors and the central diocese to stop with the second collections. There are only 7 or 8 apostolic life official collections in the diocese, and then every pastor has 5 of their own favorite charities, and then other organizations who bully our pastors into letting them take collections or fundraise in the church. Right? Our guy Jesus kicked the goat sellers out how many 2,000 years ago, and now World Vision brings goats into the lobbies of our churches to fundraise. We need him back to be kicking out these sellers. This is what it really needs to be. The weekly offertory and envelopes is really for people who want to be giving in that cash way. But we need to support pre-authorized bank debit, the cheapest, lowest fee way, easiest way for a parish to do that. And for you as a Vincentian council, monthly giving is where you really need to be. You cannot rely on these one-off things. We need all of these things to be able to support it. This is kind of the map. When I would work with parishioners, I've been in the homes of thousands of parishioners. All my work has to be confidential because it's about estate money, private money, and assets and personal wealth. So I got to see where everybody was giving. And the heart, of course, is the parish. And if there's one message I bring to you today, and it's hard because this is not a polite thing for me to say, being former diocesan curia, but I got to tell you, I'm not happy with a bishop's collections. Again, I live in the diocese that has the Cardinals dinner. If you want to talk to me at the workshop, I'll tell you what's going on there. It is not great fundraising. Special events are the highest cost, lowest profit when it comes to fundraising. They're important community events, ordinandy dinners. We need to do that. But you need to know the number one way is to talk to people, to say, here's what we take. You think about what you want to give. Here's what we accept. And as of right now, we mostly accept just cash. And through platforms like Canada Helps, community foundations, others, you can accept cash, check, stocks. Right now, cryptocurrency, all those different things can be accepted for you. But it's also who is fundraising in our pews. Right? Again, a lot of these are Society of Apostolic Life tied to the church. Outside, we've got a lot of Christian and Catholic charities as well fundraising in our churches from our people. We need to make sure, as you talk to your pastors. Yesterday, Bishop McGrattan said something that was so powerful, and I think all of us would agree. CWL, Knights of Columbus, Vincent de Paul. Those are the legs of the table for a parish. That's who shows up when we need things to get done. And we need to remind them, as much as Chalice is a wonderful Catholic charity, it is this independent, separate charity. And we do not need to be having second collections for these things if the parish itself is not strong. I want to tell you what's coming. This is not nice or convenient. We see what's going on the east coast of Canada, of dioceses having to sell churches out from under their parishioners. We know that many dioceses have not made the hard decisions to evaluate which churches need to be open and closed. It will not be a good or fun time. We know that this has to be done to preserve our community. If we lose our parishes, we lose our public connection to the Eucharist. We use our community space. So we have to be real honest about what goes on in our churches, as well what other charities are fundraising in our churches. World Vision spends so much time in our churches as a public secular Christian charity. Me to We, most folks don't know, was built in the Archdiocese of Toronto, cannibalized and destroyed Share Life's ability to work in schools and change the whole game for them, but also disconnected young Catholics from the diocese. I can openly say that and prove it. When it comes to workplace giving, today we heard Synovus is supporting North 60. You heard yesterday that organization Benevity. Benevity is actually a Canadian company born right here in Calgary. And it was created to be the most efficient processor of paycheck donations. Now, what's really interesting is the charitable sector attacked them, did not like them, because they kind of were created to destroy the United Way. They wanted to be the United Way of paycheck donations. And in fact, they would sell their services inside of corporations. They would talk to HR and say, isn't it such a pain with the United Way? Because they want you to care. We don't want you to care. We just want you to give, and we want to make it efficient, and we want to charge you the lowest fee. And they've grown to over $1 billion. We should be proud of them. They're a unicorn in Canada, a $1 billion company. Their CEO was just in the Globe and Mail last weekend. She never said she runs a charitable enterprise. She talked about technology. But this is one of the organizations, and in the workshops, I'll be sharing which ones we can't ignore. It is Canada's largest paycheck donations platform. It also has access to matching funds. So we can be talking to any of our parishioners, but also partners like a Synovus, Suncor, all these corporations that may be engaging you as Vincent de Paul, but when they put you in their employee newsletter, that's where the ask is. You can be giving to us from your paycheck every month, get that money matched. And most parishioners don't even know they could do that with their own. So again, one of the things we don't talk about is actually how our tax dollars are allocated to giving. One of the unique things I found when I worked with a number of Canadians from older generations is that quite a number of European communities actually collect money for their parishes through property taxes. And nobody explains to the average citizen, certainly not the average parishioner, how does giving work? How does money in this parish work? My job was to work directly with parishioners to give to their parishes, and they just could not ask their pastors or their finance councils the unpleasant questions they had. And so this is what they do. They just stop giving. We know that. And so we need them to understand, how does this church function? The diocese does not support us. If anything, money flows up, not down. That's the truth. And if we want ministry and liturgies and liturgical support, we need both. The other thing is that we have lost the training wheels of generosity, right? We're not teaching generosity anymore. We lost the UNICEF boxes on Halloween and a lot of public ways we taught kids about how generosity is. So what did they learn? They learned fundraising. I am traumatized by chocolate almonds. If you put them in front of me, I will gag. I have a recurring nightmare that I wake up and my father's sitting at the end of the bed and the whole room is filled with chocolate almonds. And he's like, we got to hit the streets, boy, and sell these before midnight. I have learned through therapy that that was not a nightmare. That really happened in 1987. Because my family was trying to build a community center for our refugee community of Goa here. We had 25,000 people. And they were fundraising from 1987, and it got built 2 years ago. Why? Because they were trying to build it out of chocolate almonds. I remember going back to my parish. I'm not going to say which one at the time, visiting my parents, and they're like, we're going to have a talent show to erase the parish's debt. You know, you can read T3010 charity reporting online. I'm like, Mom, you're $600,000 in debt. You don't have enough talent. I love you, but you can't bake sell your way out of this. Look, all of us South Asians and the people from overseas have diabetes now. Stop trying to feed us muffins. We're bloated. Right? We need to reteach this stuff. Now, I'm going to give you as well a number of resources. You're going to get the deck, and again, all the links to these books, but resources to help not just you, your parish council, your finance council, your pastor. These are best-selling books, and actually 2 of them are written by Canadians, Diocese of Hamilton, and actually Kitchener-Waterloo, and then Henry Nouwen's Spirituality of Fundraising, one of the strongest, most read books in the Christian world to overcome our fear. Do not use the word begging. We are asking for God's righteous work. We are representing people who cannot help themselves, vulnerable people, and we're allowed to be angry and do what we can. But these books are full of wonderful strategy of where both math, tax, and strategy meet Christian pews. I want to give you a little bit of insight again, how Canadians give and how Catholics give. I'm going to break it down into age and stage because it's really about age and stage. Who has what money when? I'm going to profile the 3 most important economic generations in Canada's economy right now: millennials, Gen Y, baby boomers, and the civic silent generation. Not going to talk about Generation X because they're statistically insignificant. And I know this because I am one. But when it comes to giving younger people in Canada, number one, we know they don't carry cash. Why do we not have tap on the boxes? And if you can't afford the tap machines or don't want to pay the fees, today you can make a QR code to your Canada Helps or whatever page right there. Because if you don't, they're going to just keep walking by. We cannot keep relying on envelopes. And I'll tell you, my Vincent de Paul, my own parish, tells me to take off all the time when I ask them to do it. They won't. It is the only reason I go to a bank machine is Vincent de Paul. I go to a bank machine, I break out all the monies at the start of the year, I keep it in a box by the front door, we have all the envelopes, and they never get more. I always tell them all the time, I'll match with your fundraising and all those things. They don't know. So how do we help young people to understand and we meet them where we are? Some resources on the future of Bitcoin, etc. It's not a thing yet. What I'm talking about is e-transfer and the future of movable money. That's where we are going. Also, there's been an explosion in the past couple of years because of the pandemic. The lawyers finally relented and allowed provincial trust law to include online wills. These platforms have allowed the most amount of Canadians under 50 to create wills in the modern history of Canada. My organization is responsible for a public national campaign called Will Power. We do studies in StatsCan and public understanding to get how many people leave gifts and wills. In Canada, about half of Canadians have a will, and those Canadians have left charities in their will to the rate of about 5%. So we know there's a lot that's possible here. And remember, middle-class people give more. In fact, lower-income Canadians give more than the traditional wealthy. Why? Because most of them are season ticket holders in our pews. They give sacrificially, right? A Christian is more likely to give you everything they have on earth. Remember, we are dealing right now with the largest amount of Canadians with the least amount of kids since Confederation. Families that used to have 10 kids have 4. People who have 6 kids have 2. And people who had 2 kids have none. That money has got to go somewhere, right? And if they are sitting in our pews, we need to remind them, if you love this church, please remember it in your will. As a diocese, I remember going out to this parish in Brampton that had a 400% increase in bequests. And I need to figure out what this pastor was doing. And the pastor said, I have no idea what you're talking about. We get bequests? Turns out the parish council had printed a tiny little sign at Costco, mounted it onto foam board, and put it at the door, between the doors of the church as you leave. And it says, if you love your parish, please make sure it's here in the years to come. Season ticket holders. If you want it to be here, please remember the parish in your will. And they went from something like 1 in 1,000 families to about 1 in 100, leaving the parish in their will. They now get only 2 bequests a year, but it's an average of $50,000 to $100,000. We don't even know. Again, when I told you about Canada's amazing tax code, when you give in Canada through your estate, you can use 100% of the tax credits against your taxes. You could wipe out the taxes your family pay by your charitable giving. The only catch is it's got to be planned as with a proper estate lawyer. And I love this box. This is the box of my parish. It drives me insane. That's where the envelopes go, and that's where everything goes, and there's no touch, there's no tap, there's no nothing. Although I got to say what's wonderful is they have a number of young people, actually with physical and mental disability, who serve as ushers. And they help these young people to manage the poor box, to be out there proud, to have it right in front of people as they go and say thank you with every donation. That's why they raise a good amount of money. Again, we've got bundle Sunday trucks. Everybody pulls up with their bundles, but every car that doesn't have a bundle could be giving if you had the little tap thing on the side of the box. You couldn't give today? Yes. So many conferences do the school starting backpacks, the hampers, etc. If you cannot, the cost of a hamper is $33.65. Here's 1 hamper, here's 2 hampers, here's 5 hampers, tap. You could do that tomorrow. We've got that technology. We've got it in the space. There'll always be a bake sale. You know, in the past 5 or 6 years, the Salvation Army kettle has converted half of their kettles to half-tap technology. Last year, I scared the bejesus out of these poor volunteers at Costco, this older couple, and I hid in the tire section. And I watched them for like 2 hours. And they were, when I finally came out, they were like, okay, you're going to kill us, right? And I'm like, no, I just want to understand donations because I've been watching you with this kettle. And they said, you know, we've been here for 10 years, son. I said, perfect. Please tell me what's changed with this tap. She said, oh, I'll tell you. And she shook it. And there was no change in there. She said, it's all bills. And now $2 is 5, $5 is 20. And we had the most amount of $100 taps we raised at this kettle today, more than we raised all of last year. We're here for 12 days. My friends, the Royal Canadian Legion has now got tap on 1,000 of their boxes. If the Legion can change, anyone can change. This is an organization whose charitable practices our donors need to stab themselves in the neck once a year. But they know if they kept on relying on cash, it wasn't going to work. And the amount that they're raising now is subsidizing the other 45,000 boxes that don't have tap. Let's talk about baby boomers and that generation and how they give. This used to be a picture of Schitt's Creek, and then things got a lot darker. Succession. That's what everybody's talking about today, succession. When I worked, and after I worked in the Archdiocese, I went to Scotiabank. And in Scotiabank, I was the head of Philanthropic Advisory Services, running foundations and private money. But why did the bank hire me? The bank said to me, we need someone that speaks the language of Christian money. The bank said to me, feel free to put a cross up in your cubicle, son. Because they wanted that money, right? We know what's going on here when it comes to succession. We need to be ready for this next generation, but we have only taught them how to give by cash, right? When I first worked in the bank, an advisor called me to his office, and he was yelling at a little old lady. I'm like, what am I doing here? He said, my client has said something awful to me and charity is to blame. I'm like, all right, that's why I'm here. He said, my client is worth $6 million. She has saved her entire life. She has no children. She's actually inherited a little bit. And that's what's going on in Canada right now. Largest amount of people, least amount of kids. We'll see more Canadians laterally inherited. Cousins, uncles, aunts. She has $6 million and no kids, wants to leave it all to charity. Great. I'm like, why are you yelling? He said, because she asked me how I can make her a budget to help her spend less money on groceries so that she can afford to give more to charity. He was yelling because she was living on $35,000 a year. He said, for Pete's sake, you took the bus here. You're worth $6 million. Take an Uber. She said, one day I hope to go on a cruise. He said, you got $6 million. We'll buy you a boat. She said, no, it's all going to charity. And he said, great, let's make the plan. The charity's guy's here. And she said, I cannot even speak. I'm going to plan out how to give away $6 million when I've never written a check for more than $500 in my life. She was paralyzed. That's why most of my work is teaching financial advisors how to talk to their clients about giving away money and also teaching them how not to be afraid of God. And if their client has season tickets in a pew, then you need to ask them, are they taking care of their parish? That's what we need to do when it comes to this culture. Again, a couple more stories again about the different mechanisms. Most people don't know the story of the creator of dynamite. Turn of the century, this incredible philanthropist had given away millions of dollars, and he received a really weird gift. The world thought he was dead. And so he woke up one morning to his obituary on the front cover of France's national newspaper. All of his money was going to charity. He said, okay, I may be one of the greatest modern philanthropists. Let's see what the world thinks of me. And his obituary was, hooray, the merchant of death is dead. Let us celebrate putting this horrible man into the ground. And he did not like that. Almost all of the money was already going to charity. But what he did was he went back and he told a story with a narrative. He said, I want this to have an understanding. What was his name? Alfred Nobel. That was the creation of the Nobel Peace Prize. The money was already going to go, but because he gave it legs and longevity. I've got a whole bunch of parishioners I worked on. When we say preaching to the choir, choirs are real, man. You talk about gang warfare. The 8 a.m. choir versus the 11 a.m. choir, and that 7 p.m. cantor will take them all on. But what do we need? How many people have been to parishes? And I'm a CPW guy. I don't know this gather stuff. But how many parishes have that duct tape on the spine? And I worked with 2 choir members who are blessed in life. They knew they were. Their kids were okay. And they're leaving all of their estate, millions of dollars, to create a fund in actually one diocese in Canada that will pay for hymnals for 5 parishes a year forever. Whenever we talk to people about what their dream is, if you ask for 20 bucks, all you get is 20 bucks. But if you tell them, what's your dream? How do we make your dream possible, dear parishioner? You sit in this pew next to me. Let's dream together. And Vincent de Paul can help them dream because other organizations don't do. We do. Right? So that's the possibility here. A couple more. One is when I worked at the University of Toronto, I had a social work donor. She was a social worker her whole life. She was giving $500,000 to a scholarship. And the whole time she was cranky as all heck. And again, I just come from Scarborough Missions, and those words, God loves a cheerful giver, are still in my head. And she was so angry at every meeting till I finally said to her, look, what's the problem? She said, I hate giving to university because giving to universities and hospitals, because of the law, because of the way the government grants money to match it to donations, it has to be endowed. She said, I don't like that. And frankly, I don't like the way you give away money. We said, fine, what do you want? She said, let me tell you my story. And we had never asked her story. You want people's money? You're going to have to get their story first. How do you live? Where does the church live in your story? Where do the poor live in your story? And many of them will even tell you what they could give. So she said, I was a social worker my whole life. I never got out from under my school debt my whole life. And then in retirement, I met someone and we got married. And actually that person, we had a wonderful life together and they are gone. Here's the fun part. They were rich and now they're dead and I'm rich. She said, this is what I want. I don't want you to pick a student who has financial need because many of them don't stay in the profession. I don't want you to pick a student of academic excellence because those jerks never stay fundraisers. They go into management and we don't like them. I want the faculty to pick a person who's going to be like me, a social worker who's going to grind it out their whole life. I don't want an award. I don't want a plaque. I want the faculty to tap them on the shoulder in front of their family at graduation and explain to them that their entire school debt is erased. And I want to do that every year forever. And our response was, you're giving $500,000. This will be a minimum 0 on the end of this gift. And her response was, did I blink? I've been to a lot of parish euchre tournaments and poker tournaments. This is where it comes into play. She said, I don't care. I've got the money. I'm leaving this earth and I want to see things being done. And the great news, colleagues, is that universities, hospitals, big charities are gigantic. And through government bureaucracy and the law of how money is used in charity, there's a lot they can't do. And Vincent de Paul was started by a 20-year-old pissed off university student named Blessed Frederick Ozanam, who said, we are going to do something. And that is our spirit. And that really connects with people when they don't see things done. The last one is going to tie to my workshop this afternoon and the different methods of giving. People do not know the ways we can give in Canada. This high school janitor was retiring. I was at the diocese, and his estate made a $100,000 gift to the Catholic School Board for breakfast programs. He was a janitor. And I called up the state and asked for the story. And they said, when he was retiring, the financial advisor said, you got 5 kids. There's no way this insurance policy will protect your family's wealth. So we're going to make a new plan, a new policy. Remember, many Catholic boards had janitors and a whole bunch of school board employees that had insurance policies in the 80s and 90s. In Canada, you can donate those policies, get a tax receipt, and the money goes to charity. When he retired, he got a 5-figure tax receipt to help his family in cash money. And when he died, $100,000 went to the church for breakfast programs for kids because of life insurance. Nobody even knew you could donate life insurance. In Canada, it's a $1 billion donation platform that nobody knows about. Lastly, the civic or the silent generation, Canada's 80 plus. For a lot of us, a lot of our parishes are filled with these wonderful folks. Again, season ticket holders. Why do I say that? Because every time I go to a different parish, and I visit hundreds of parishes, and I sit down for Sunday Mass in a spot, there's usually a senior that walks to me like, that's my spot. And in Anglican churches, I could say, I don't see a plaque. But we don't do that in Catholic churches. But we got to know a lot of these folks. I'm actually working with the Blue Jays and the Maple Leaf Sports in a little while. Because do you know how you actually transfer season tickets in Canada? You got to bequeath them. And we should need to be talking about season tickets in parish and bequeathing those pews. People want those pews to be there in the future. This generation right now, with how much wealth and how much capital, largest amount of Canadians, least amount of kids, and they're going to leave this earth. And we've just got to remind them that their parish is there. Every time I would be working on a Share Life or some other Christian giving, and I would remind a Catholic about their parish. Remember the V8 commercials in the 80s? Well, I could have had a V8. That's how people react when you remind them about their parish. You're giving to Chalice and World Vision, and you're in your parish pew every week. Please remember your parish. Number one way in life, monthly, and they need to think about bequests. This is the work of Dr. Russell James out of Texas Tech University in the States, a fascinating researcher who studies the neurobiology of philanthropy. He does something really cool. He puts donors into an MRI machine, and then he reads fundraising brochures to them for 6 hours. And then he sees what parts of their brain light up. Well, when people give through bake sales, cash money, it's warm and fuzzy. But just so you know, the neurobiology of how people give their assets, and particularly gifts and wills, is tied to autobiography. Where does the charity live in your life story? There's very few charities that live in the life story like Vincent de Paul does. If you're a parishioner your whole life, you've been donating to bundle Sundays and all that your whole life, we need to let them know the church needs to be here. The poor need your help. Please remember us in this way. Yeah. So we've got a whole bunch of ways. One of the things I'm going to share with you with the workshop is the advancements in charitable giving in Canada. People don't know. There is literally through Canada Life a product called charitable life insurance. We got Tim Sesnick writing in the Globe, Jamie Gollenbeck in the Post. The public knows about it, but they only think they can do it to universities and hospitals and the United Way. They don't even know their parish is a charity a lot of times. The key question is, how do you want to be remembered? Not do you want to give? You are a member of this parish, and especially Vincentians. In our own councils, we need to say, we need to remember the organization in our will. Because it's not about being a donor. The new way of fundraising is about identity. I'm not just a library donor, we're library people. You know what they're trying to do? They're trying to bring the church world into secular world. We are Catholics. This is what we do. This is our community. We get to say that. So some of the things I'm going to give you in the workshop, again, the methods in Canada of accepting donations. The good news is you're not going to have to do a lot of this because we are actually out there training advisors. This is something we created as an association. We were created CAGP, Canadian Association of Gift Planning, Tax Planning, Financial Planning, Estate Planning, Gift Planning. We've created a designation called the Master Financial Advisor in Philanthropy. We have trained 200 advisors across Canada. I can tell you a quarter of them are Catholic, right? On Ash Wednesday, I used to go down to St. Stephen's Chapel on Bay Street, look for all those ash crosses. Dougie's a Catholic, Susan's a Catholic, Dave's a Catholic. That was prospect research. Remember, the cross is on their heart. They know what they got to do. A lot of them know they're not giving enough. You cannot compete outside these doors. Please remember, and we want to bring young people in, bring the spirit of Frederick Ozen in. That 20-year-old who was pissed off and then he became a lawyer. But we can do that. Do not, and remind your pastor, we need to not be letting other organizations in our doors, in our second collections. We need to make sure we're not asking people 50 times, and we need to make sure we're thanking them 50 times. We can do all of this together because there is hope, and I'll show you this afternoon. There's billions of dollars of giving in Canada. There is more coming. We just got to make sure that we capture it from our parishioners, not because they owe it or anything, because they want to find ways to find meaning. And Vincent de Paul is one of the strongest ways they can find action happening every day. There we go. Thank you all for having me.